Hello everyone, welcome back to Altengrad City in City Skylines. Last time we did a few repairs. We built the wooden bridge next to the partially collapsed one, we cleared the rubble from the harbor, industrial zone and a few city blocks. And today we will continue building a few unfinished pre-war projects, but first there is something very important, something I neglected, and that is preparing the vehicles. Not only for the next decade, but also fixing some old ones. So let's jump into the City Skylines asset editor and do something there. And there are a lot of things that I need to do here. We are going to start by customizing some cargo trucks and also some railway vehicles. So not only the steam engines that we already have in the city, but also something new. Like you can see here, some diesel and electric engines that are going to be in the city in the 1950s. So I just plopped them down here as props, and then I'm just dumping the textures and models with mod tools. So I can do some slight changes because I have issues, for example, with brightness, either too bright or too dark with the textures, or some kind of, little changes. So, for example, the cargo trucks. There was a huge problem. Back when I started Altengrad, I didn't have every single vehicle for every single industrial specialization. So, for example, when a industrial building required oil or ore as a raw material, they couldn't get it because there wasn't a vehicle for that. And I thought that I'm just going to fix that by downloading some new vehicles, which I kind of did. For example, this Gas 51, I believe, which is for the 1940s decade post-war vehicle, I believe. But it also comes only as a certain specialization, only the generic one perhaps, or something different, but definitely not all. I also downloaded that American Ford 40s, 30s trucks, something like that. But I know, it's not like, Central European, but it looks similar to the vehicle, so that's fine. But that's also not complete. Now, for this gas truck, I also had an issue because it had like color changes also to the back, to the cargo area, which was kind of looking weird. So I just changed the color map of it so that it's not going to be recolored, and I just made it brown so that it's always going to stay like wooden color. Now the Ford truck that I downloaded also had an issue. It was way too oversized. It was actually way too big. And this kind of is logical if you think about it. When asset creators make railway vehicles, they obviously need to fit to the tracks, right? So that's kind of easy, I suppose. Well, not easy, but kind of straightforward. But road vehicles, that's a bit of a different story, right? You don't really see it at first glance that it's, correct scale. So I also had to do some scaling things there. And I'm not really going to show it here, but for the 1950s, like personal cars and some like vans or buses, I also had to completely rescale. They were just completely off, right? So I'm probably going to talk about that in the next episode. So those were the cargo trucks. Now we finally have cargo truck for every single specialization. Now for the railway vehicles, I for example had this boxcar, like forever. It's the Soviet boxcar, I believe, from the workshop, really old asset, and it's very bright. So what I did here is I actually only just created the color map. You could have just seen me do that in there in just Microsoft Paint. And what it does is it allows me to make it darker in-game with, for example, advanced vehicle options. And it also allows me to do tiny bit of color variations between the different cars, which is going to look great. Obviously, not every single car is going to have the same like tone of wood it's made of, and things like that. So it's definitely good to do it that way. I also changed in a similar way another boxcar, I think like a Finnish boxcar or something like that, or no, different one. I don't remember. But that one was, on the other hand, way too dark. So I had to actually change the texture, make it brighter, and then include the color map as well. With this, what is it called? Anos, I think, is the description of it, designation, I don't know, which is, I suppose, not exactly historical, but it just looks, fine for like transporting coal or something like that. It actually comes with sub-meshes for coal and some other stuff inside. It has also some kind of modern submeshes that I got rid of, which is also something that you can easily do in the asset editor. Now we're going to prepare two different passenger wagons, shorter and longer. The shorter is going to be something older. I'm only going to be using it on like older steam engines, shorter trains. It's going to be probably some kind of local transport, and the longer wagon is going to be something slightly more modern for like express trains and things like that. So for the longer one, I had to make it brighter, and for the shorter one, I had to make it more darker because it's not exactly matching. It was looking kind of strange. And then I need to do something about the logos and all the markings, because most of these are in German. They have, I don't know, pre-war, East, West, German logos. So I cannot get rid of them. It's not like I don't like to have them, but I need to have it somewhat blended together. And also I don't want to put Altengrad on the map. So that's why I'm getting rid of some of the logos that are kind of easily recognizable, I suppose, even from some distance, which is especially the case for the DB logos and, all kinds of other ones, probably in the future as I keep downloading more stuff for next decades. So, don't look too much into it. I'm just doing that so that Altengrad is not in any particular real-life country, right? I talked about this many times, that Altengrad is just like in a generic Central European country. It's nowhere in particular. Now, for the engines. So I have now 3 steam engines. Now, the one that I downloaded, made by Jens, that's already kind of good. It already has the specular, I think, map, which is the reflectivity, which should be there. The engines are painted in like a metallic black. And this one that I had, the BR52, I believe, the longest, the heaviest locomotive, it wasn't. It only had the flat black texture matte. And I made it slightly reflective, and also made the windows much more reflective than that. And also, I think I made it slightly darker. No, I didn't. I kept it the way it was. Now, this one that I'm doing here, this is the Heritage steam train, which is the TP3, I believe. It's some kind of a museum train these days, and it was very bright, first and foremost, and then it didn't have any kind of specular map as well. And it had very, very white windows, which was just looking kind of strange. So I kind of blended together these 3 locomotives, made them look somewhat similar, but, different enough so that there is some difference. And then I just saved them both as cargo options or cargo locomotives, engines, and passenger ones as well. Well, actually, for the passenger, we are going to do that later together with the wagons. Now, I also downloaded from the workshop a couple of electric locomotives, the 110 and 140, I believe. The green one is 140. Yeah. If my information is correct, these were all made first in 1950s, so this should be historically accurate, although the liveries are probably going to be somewhat off, maybe not, I don't know, I'm not really sure about this. But again, I had to get rid of the logos because they were just not really looking, great for Altengrad. And I replaced it with a red star at the front of the locomotive, which was kind of common, especially in Czechoslovakia, but I suppose in other countries as well. And, this is obviously telling us where Altengrad is headed for the second half of the 20th century, even though it's no surprise. I was talking about that many times before. So those were the 2 electric locomotives that I got. Then I also got a Swedish electric locomotive, which was looking really great. It was also 1950s era. And sure, not Central European, but it kind of looked similar to some locomotives that are around here in that time. So I just used it. It's looking really great. It has like a generic logo of some made-up City Skylines railways, so that's absolutely fine. And that's going to be used for pulling both cargo and passengers, just like the electric ones before. This one is like a rail bus or something. It's the VT98, I believe, also a 1950s vehicle from Germany, from West Germany, if I'm not mistaken, which is, again, slightly off, but it's very similar to similar vehicles for example, Czechoslovak vehicles of similar size and color actually as well, which is kind of interesting. The problem that I had here is that I wasn't really able to make like a 3, 4, and 5 car version, which I wanted to, because then they wouldn't really match. So I had to make it with every single car being the same model as the engine, which is, slightly off. Downloaded from the workshop. The 2-car version actually has a different texture for the trailer. And I also made it slightly darker because it was way too bright. And then it occurred to me, like now that I'm seeing this, I probably should have made it slightly bumpier, the texture, because it's otherwise very flat. But, well, oh well, I just forgot about that. But, that vehicle is not going to stay with us forever. It's obviously going to be phased out in the modern times, but I definitely had to make it slightly darker, and I had to include again the specular map to make especially the windows very, very reflective. You can see me just compare most of these vehicles with, for example, stuff made by Revo or some of the trams, because I know that those are just made very well with the colors, with the brightness, and all kinds of reflections. So I'm kind of comparing it with that. So now I'm just testing the stuff if it works, and I'm pleasantly surprised that it does. I'm not really sure if it's taking on passengers or anything, because this is just like a testing map. But at least it's moving. The wagons are where they are supposed to be, so that's absolutely fine. This Swedish locomotive, for example, has a color map, which is kind of preferable for me, because then I can control the actual livery in-game using even just the vanilla, color of the line, or the advanced vehicle options, especially for the cargo trailers. So I'm obviously going to use the random train trailers, which I haven't until this point, which is kind of strange, but I didn't, yeah. And, oh yeah, by the way, if you guys know this issue, this boxcar, the Soviet boxcar, as you can see, it's kind of longer, I suppose, so the couplings don't really match. If you guys know how to fix that issue, then that would be nice. But I didn't really find any options for changing the sizes of the carriages, so not exactly sure how to deal with that, but it's not really that big of a deal. So yeah, I'm going to be using the random train trailers. Right now we're just going to use the box cars, 2 types, and flat car, and the other car, I don't know its name, the Anos, for coal. Next thing that I need to do, and something that I should have done right from the beginning, is to add the smoke effect. Proper, nice black smoke for all the steam trains. Now for this, I used the script that came with the locomotive made by Jens, but as I understand it, it's a script first made by Evametry, so definitely check that out in the workshop. I'm probably going to put it here and in the video description. And I just did some changes, because what I didn't like about the smoke is that it was just hanging on top of the locomotive for a really long time in the station, right? It's looking really great how it's just staying in the air after it passes, but in the station I did some changes. I placed a couple of forbidden flags for that. Anyway, now let's go into Altengrad and do some building. So I marked there a couple of areas, 3 areas that I would like to focus on today. So those are like pre-war projects that we haven't finished. Now, first of all, I did like a little showcase of new vehicles for 1940s, right? So that's the Gaz M50 or M51, just 51. That's the cargo truck that we customized in the workshop, because I was building this before the workshop thing, the asset editor thing. And then we also have a new personal vehicle, which is the Gaz M21. And that's exactly the time when I noticed that those vehicles are really oversized. They are like 20% bigger than they need to be, especially that M21 vehicle was just way too large compared to some of the similar sized cars from real life, right? So I had to go into the workshop, and you're going to see that in the next episode, where we're going to move into the 50s. I'm going to give you an overview of all the new vehicles that we have, road vehicles, of course. Anyway, this project in Altengrad, this was like a residential area. It's heavily inspired by an area in real life in Prague, which was also partially continued during the war even, which is, interesting, but it was also continued in the 40s, late 40s, after the war ended. So I'm kind of doing that here as well in Altengrad, but I have to make a little confession. I don't really have a lot of plans for the late 1940s. I was just, checking some maps, different kinds of aerial views of cities, and there weren't that many changes. It was mostly all about just clearing the rubble, repairing some damage, and that was it. But no new big projects. I'm sure that there are cities and examples in the world where, things happened a lot in the 40s, but Central Europe, maybe not so much. So this is going to be the last 1940s episode in Altengrad. I'm not going to bother with any kind of overview or anything because it's not like we added much, and we are just going to jump straight into the 50s. So that's why I also wanted to do that vehicle, customization, because that's going to be really important. That's going to be the main visual change to the city at first, the new vehicles. We are obviously going to go away from that classical style of vehicles, and we are just going to slowly go towards that more modern 50s style of vehicles, which is going to be insanely obvious for buses especially. Those are just completely different. But anyway, this place that I'm doing here, so just detailing it, just using all kinds of like decals and just kind of props, not doing it all that much because these places are new, so I need to use only small trees, right? And what I also did there is I just changed the small trees from the 30s and made them slightly longer so that it's going to look like they grew a bit, right? So that's just like a tiny little detail that I would like to continue. But this was the first thing that I did, first building project that kind of continued something that I started in the 30s, and it's kind of interesting how I need to be careful in these kinds of things. By the way, this is the second area that we're gonna take a look at, like a residential area on the other side of the city, also like a construction site prepared to be finished. But yeah, what I need to pay attention to at this point and from now forward is that I must not change anything that's already standing, especially trees, because obviously it doesn't make sense that I'm just going to maybe move a couple of trees here and there, because it would be like very visible in like before and after comparisons, and obviously that's not how it's done. If a tree is in the way, then you either need to cut it down, or yeah, sure, you can, move it today with some kind of means, but why bother, right? If it's in the way, just cut it down. So I need to also do that in the game. Really need to pay attention to that. And not only that, but I should really pay attention to just not move and not change anything that's already standing. Otherwise, I would just need to like rebuild it or something like that. So that's going to be a major difference compared to my previous building experience in this series. Right now, it's all going to be about changing what's already present. Yeah, I suppose that's how I should explain it or talk about it. So this little area on the edge of the city is not going to be finished after today. It's just going to be like tiny bit continued. Oh yeah, there you can see that M21 vehicle being a bit oversized. Although maybe this is already a repaired version. I'm not really sure. It's kind of not looking that bad. But if you compare it to like a person, it's bad. It's really, really big. And that's supposed to be like a working class vehicle. Well, maybe not working class, obviously. People could still afford cars all that much back in the day. So it's supposed to be a small car, small car. Yeah, so I'm going to change that. So this place, I have a lot of plans for this particular area when it comes to infrastructure. Right now, I don't really want to commit to it because most of the infrastructure plans are probably for the 1960s or something. But this place is going to see a lot of changes, especially that tram loop, because that's going to be completely different. Right now, we are at the edge of the city, of course. From this point towards the edge of the map, we just have some country roads, 0 highways on the maps. So that's also something that we will have to work on. So this place that I'm building right here is just a continuation of that residential area. I'm just going to build a couple of these dirt roads. By the way, it's kind of interesting doing like a historical research, or well, not historical, but map research. I definitely noticed a lot of places in various cities where you didn't really have roads before you had buildings, which is kind of interesting. That's not really how it's done today. If you have like a residential area, usually the city, I suppose, orders the roads, they are built, and then the various plots get sold to the customers and they just build their own houses there, or maybe like a developer builds like a larger residential project. But you already have the roads, right? And all the infrastructure, pipes and everything. But back in the day, it was not uncommon to have nothing, like literally nothing, and then suddenly a building just popped up in the middle of nowhere, And maybe after a couple of years, after the rest of the block was finished, they started building the roads and all the infrastructure. So that was kind of interesting, kind of weird, looking at maps of like 1938, 45 Prague, where some of the city blocks were really looking strange because it was just a building, like a block building, obviously with those bare walls on both sides, just in the middle of a field. 0 roads, just some dirt access path. So, that's kind of something interesting. I don't really want to do that too much in Altengrad, of course. I want to focus more on like infrastructure projects and things like that. But, here and there, we might do these kinds of areas as well. Now, we're going to return to the industrial zone at last, and we are just going to repair the road, the main road, and also the industrial buildings. Also this, there was a bit of an issue because in the asset editor, when you are doing these color combinations, you cannot see the color codes, right? You can only see that in the advanced vehicle options in the game. So I was just doing that kind of randomly in the editor, and then I did it so that every single vehicle for every single, one instance or one model of the truck for every single option of the industry is going to have the same color chances, or color combination. So we are going to have for the same model of the truck only 4 colors, even though the truck is going to be for oil, ore, and all those other things, because I don't really want to just have like a clown parade of different colored cars in the city in the 1940s, 50s. So that wouldn't look exactly that good, right? So, but yeah, the bottom line here is that finally we have all the vehicles for every single industry. So we should finally start doing some proper, even like gameplay fixes to the city, which is obviously good. Now, speaking of gameplay fixes, I'm also going to put back this railway cargo station inside this big hall so that it's going to receive the cargo trains, and it's just going to resupply not only this industrial area, but the rest of the city. But more industry is planned as we progress in time, so that's also going to happen. But anyway, this is the last transition that we are going to see today. So that's the factory hall, completely reworked, completely repaired, and it's going to start doing its thing. By the way, I should then do also the building spawn points for this one and make it so that the cars are probably going to just go all to one point. Last thing that I'm going to do, this is very important, of course, those box cars and all those little props, I need to change to the new versions. So as you could have seen, the box car was definitely very, very bright, and now the new version is just looking so much better. It's kind of looking a bit weathered, which makes sense because these box cars were obviously already, on the railways for decades, right, in the past. And also these kinds of cars as well. Now, let's talk about the plans for the future, for the next episode. Like I said, in the next episode, we are going to advance to the 1950s. We are going to build a completely new project in the city, although it's going to be like a refurbishment of some old area that we are going to rework. So hopefully that's going to be something interesting. But anyway, that's going to be all for today. Thank you for watching this episode of Altengrad. Hope you liked it, and hope you maybe learned something about just customizing your vehicles. It's really not hard, and I never did that before, and it's kind of straightforward. It's really easy to do. So even if you are not an asset creator, you can easily just customize your own things. But anyway, that's going to be completely all. So thank you for watching again. Hope you liked it. If you did, then you can do the usual thumbs up, comments, subscribes, and you can also become a channel member if you really like this content and you want to support it directly. Big thanks to all the channel members that we have currently. Really appreciate it, guys. Stay tuned for more, and goodbye.